What car is the most reliable? Which one's the least reliable? And how's Tesla doing? Those results and a whole lot more from Consumer Reports' annual reliability survey next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome to Talking Cars with Consumer Reports. I'm Tom Mutchler.
I'm Jake Fisher.
I'm Anita Lam.
It's fall. The leaves are falling from the trees. Little kids roam your neighborhood threatening you for candy. And it's time for the Consumer Reports annual reliability survey. I'm so happy to have Anita here. You do a lot of work every year on this survey. A very smart lady. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, excellent. Thanks. A quick side diversion, though. I want to thank all those people who sent in suggestions as to what to name our videos. There were a lot of common trends, some really unique suggestions. We're going to take a look at that and pick a name, and we'll let you know, well, you'll see on YouTube what we pick. But it's not just naming our videos that our readers and our subscribers help us with. Explain how this survey works.
Well, this is an annual survey, so every year we send out a survey to both our magazine and online subscribers, asking them about problems they had experienced with their cars in the last 12 months. And there are 17 trouble areas that they can check if they have that problem. And for those online, they could also answer the details about exactly what problems they had.
So subscribers can really drill down and find out what little tiny problems there are with the car.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
How big is this survey?
Well, we've been getting around over 1 million, and we still had 1 million vehicles this year.
So with all that, what are the problems that new car owners typically have? I mean, their engines aren't falling out, I hope.
No. The amount of engines falling out was at a minimum this year.
Excellent.
What we did find is it's not so much the car, it's the computer that they shoehorned into the car and
to play my music
and all that. It's the infotainment screen, right?
I mean,
every car has got basically an iPad like jammed into the dashboard. And the automakers, they aren't that good at making iPads. So we found a lot of infotainment problems once again. It's very interesting though, because when you start looking at some of the trends, now, of course, my Ford Touch, I mean, we've heard about that, and my Lincoln Touch, and they were one of the first ones that really had this broad, everybody gets an iPad, everybody gets
2011.
Right.
Widespread application.
Widespread problems. Widespread problems. But they have been really actually working on that, and every subsequent year they're getting better with those. But what's happening now is other automakers are getting into the game, and they're stumbling just as much or even more. More so.
Yeah, you come out with a new system. I mean, this is going to be a common trend through this podcast. You come out with something new. Not too many people can pull that off right off the bat. It takes time to work problems out. But we often get the criticism, but okay, so my radio doesn't work or my phone doesn't pair. That doesn't make the car unreliable. But it's more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yes, and actually, even if you ignore all these problems that won't get you stranded, there are other problem areas. Talking about new technology, for example, now that we have the 9-speed automatic transmission, and those are problematic as well. So every new technology you introduce the car would have to be worked out.
So often these cars that have infotainment problems, even if they never had infotainment problems, they often have a bunch of other problems that make them unreliable.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, say someone, all I wanted to do, I want to buy the most reliable car. What is the most reliable brand?
The most reliable brand, well, again, it's Lexus, and it's followed by Toyota. Toyota and Lexus, they're consistently putting out very reliable vehicles. And what's interesting about Lexus is, we talk about this infotainment. Well, Lexus has been putting in those screens for quite a long time.
Stupid mouse, yeah.
Well, and that, I'm glad you bring that up, because the stupid mouse, it's an ergonomic issue. Mm-hmm. It's an issue of being complex or difficult to control it. It doesn't break, though. And that's what our data shows.
Also, Toyota had the most reliable new car in our survey. What was that?
Yes, it's the Scion Xb that's made by Toyota, the parent company.
And they've made that for 1,000 years at this point.
Well, the latest redesign was the 2008?
Maybe?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not a great car. I mean, it gets 23 miles per gallon. There's SUVs that do better than that, but they've been building it forever, and it just just seems to keep going.
Right, reliability and how good the car is in terms of our road test, it's a completely different thing. I mean, out here, we're at the track, we test how that car performs, how well that car suits your needs and stuff like that. We're not assessing reliability. The reliability is a completely different piece. Comes from our subscribers, comes from the million vehicles. And sometimes you do get vehicles that are very reliable, but they're not very good.
Right.
So the XB won't be that good, but won't be very good for a very, very long time.
And same with the Yaris.
Right.
And we'll see later on that there are other alternatives to an XB that are a little less reliable, but are much nicer cars. But we'll get to that in a bit. We'll also come back to the Japanese automakers in a bit. I think a lot of people want to know, how is GM doing? You know, is the whole new GM thing just a bunch of hype? You know, they're always in the news with recalls. People are probably still bitter about the buyout and all that. Is there signs of hope with GM?
Well, GM came out a whole bunch of redesign for 2014 models, and some of them actually come out reliable. It's like the Chevrolet Impala that we all loved, and also the Corvette. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the pickup truck, the Silverado and the GMC Sierra, they are not as lucky. They have a whole bunch of small problems, but that add up to that not being reliable.
But in the end, if I remember, Cadillac CTS was also a very reliable launch. If I remember, GM is currently the most reliable domestic automaker.
Yeah, that's correct. And if that reflects a new GM, then they are on the right track.
Good. I mean, a car like the Corvette, to do a clean sheet design and have that be average in its first year is a pretty neat trick.
Yeah, so I mean, GM, it's in the second year of being basically the most reliable domestic automaker, and that's something to be said for. And it wasn't that way just a few years ago. GM was among the bottom, even among the domestics. So I mean, they are getting their stuff together. And if you look, again, you look closely, like Anita says, it's really that pickup truck that is holding them back. If they get those problems really put to bed, bad pickup truck, bad.
Nice.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
They'll be hauling. There you go.
They're also helped by Buick, aren't they?
Right. Actually, the Buick is the most reliable GM brand. All their models are average or better. And they ranked among the top 10 brands when we do a brand ranking.
So if you look at that in perspective, so I mean, you got Buick in the top 10, but also just GM as a whole, we were looking at them, and GM on a whole as a manufacturer is ahead of Nissan right now.
Wow.
So who would have thought that?
We'll get to reasons why in a bit. How's Ford? I mean, Ford used to be the poster child. Ford used to have terrific reliability, and then they introduced a bunch of new cars.
Yeah, Ford's been ups and downs, right? So Ford, go back several years when they had an older product line, they were very reliable. Then they introduced everything, right? I mean, everything was new. New powertrains, new transmissions, new infotainment, and they wound up at the bottom of the barrel. There looks like there's a turnaround going on right now. And it looks like, as we talked before, My Ford Touch, they seem to be working out some of the kinks on that. It's not the least reliable infotainment system. Some of the other cars are becoming more reliable. So look at the Fusion. Here's an entry that in our testing, this is a great mid-size sedan. It's a great car to drive. We're now recommending every version of it because the reliability has come up.
Right. Same thing with the Explorer. It scored a little too low to be recommended, but it's a big seller, and it's now reliable.
Right, and a lot of that has to do with the infotainment system. When they launched in 2011, they had like 10% problem just in infotainment.
Wow.
But this year on the new 2014 models, it's now down to 3%. So they did a lot of work to improve that.
I think Fiat-Chrysler Group probably wishes they were doing as well as Ford. They're kind of having a rough time of it, aren't they?
Yeah, unfortunately, Fiat cars are the least reliable.
Surprising. Yeah, the 500L is our least reliable car,
Right.
but even...
That's what the L stands for, least reliable.
Wow, okay, I'm going to let that one go too. I'll just say loser. I hate that car. But cars like the new Jeep Cherokee that's parked behind us, that didn't do too well either.
Yeah, that's the one with the 9-speed auto transmission.
And if I remember right, the 4-cylinder Cherokee is the least reliable small SUV you can buy. I mean, it's funny because Jeep, a couple years ago, Jeep was actually a reliable brand. It was doing really well, but that was when they built the they had Compass and Patriot, who had been around forever.
Right.
They had a couple years of Grand Cherokee that was doing all right. But this year, they introduced that Cherokee. They redesigned Grand Cherokee, which was kind of a mess, and it really sent them down.
Yeah, again, it has to do with the infotainment. You connect, in which it is so easy to use, but they kind of have the new revised touch system, and that causes quite a bit of problems.
Yeah, there's a new version of it.
Yeah. There's another piece of the puzzle too, and like Anita said before, even if you start taking out some of these infotainment system problems, it's still underlying it. They're not reliable vehicles. And what's interesting about Chrysler is if you go back 10 years, it's the partners has changed so much with Chrysler. So I mean, you go back before, and they were partnered with Mitsubishi, and they had Mitsubishi engines, which it's not the best automaker, but they made reliable things. Then they were partners with Mercedes-Benz, and they had many platforms that were shared with Mercedes-Benz. Now these new platforms, based on Fiat's, are even less reliable. So it's almost like they're getting their partners are moving from reliable to not so good to bottom of the barrel, and that's what we're seeing with Fiat, unfortunately.
Yeah, I am happy to say the Durango is still reliable.
Yes.
Mercedes-Benz.
I think it also benefits from having a couple months of, Durango always trails Grand Cherokee, so you probably get to work out a couple.
Right, and that brings to the point that you don't totally redesign a vehicle. You carry some of the powertrains or whatever, or you introduce some models slightly later. Again, I don't know whether we want to talk about the Koreans, about
let's go
Kia
there.
and Hyundai.
Let's talk about Kia and Hyundai.
Yeah, Kia did very well this year. They had the Kia Cadenza was brand new, and it had above average reliability for the first year.
Kia Soul did too,
Kia
which
Soul,
is a far
yes.
better car than an XB,
Right.
and is a little less reliable,
Exactly.
but is a far better car.
Kia Soul, again, a redesigned car, is above average, and the Kia Forte, also redesigned, is now average.
But why are they doing better than their corporate cousin Hyundai?
So, you look at Hyundai and Kia, and, it's difficult to figure out, what's the difference between these two companies, right? I mean,
Yeah, they got merged together.
they're merged together, and they're not like, it's not really clear, is Hyundai the luxury one? Is Kia the sporty one? Nobody really knows. But what's interesting about it is that Hyundai seems to win at getting the vehicles first. So there's a new platform designed or something like that, Hyundai gets it first, and then Kia gets it later. But what's strange about it is it totally works for Kia, because Hyundai gets to work out the kinks. When Kia gets the platform, those kinks are worked out, and we're seeing consistently Kia is making the more reliable product.
Right, because Hyundai Azera came out before Cadenza, so you were able to work that out.
Exactly.
You had Accent came out before Rio, if I remember right, so that helped Soul. Yeah, so
Elantra.
Yeah, and Elantra came out before Forte, so it all works for them. Let's go to the Japanese car companies. Some Japanese car companies can launch new cars reliably. Mazda is doing really well at this. How's some new models from Mazda?
Well, Mazda redesigned the Mazda 6 in 2014. We had some data last year, but now it has more exposure, and it still remains very reliable. So is the CX-5, the small SUV that it introduced.
And the Mazda 3 is doing okay.
Yeah. Now, the Mazda 3 did have some problems because infotainment system, talking about infotainment system, so they introduced this new touch screen on some of the higher trim models.
Yeah, and that's not as reliable.
That's not as reliable, but because overall the car is so reliable, it didn't drag them down to below average. They're still average or better.
Another Japanese company that can launch reliable cars seems to be Subaru. The Forester had a pretty good year.
Yep. Subaru is very often one of the best performing vehicles and very reliable vehicles consistently.
Now, there is an exception. There is one unreliable Toyota, and if I remember correctly, one unreliable Subaru. And that is the one that they developed together, the BRZ and FRS.
Yes.
They're getting better, but they aren't great, right?
Yeah, they improve a little bit, but still they are still well below average.
Another Japanese company that had far more troubles is Nissan. Nissan really is kind of digging a bit of a hole for themselves, it seems here.
Well, there's a couple of pieces. I mean, Nissan has never been one of the most reliable brands. A lot of their introductions, even last year, they stumbled with, and they had below average reliability. I mean, one of the real outliers is what's happening with Infiniti. So, I mean, other than changing all the names, so no one really knows what they're buying anymore.
I can't figure it out.
It was really just amazing looking at, we talked about this too in terms of testing, right? The G that turned into the Q 3.18
sure,
or whatever
exactly,
it is,
yeah.
the Q50. And this is a car that just went way down in terms of the way the car performed, but now we have reliability information and it is really not good. And actually when we looked at infotainment system problems in particular, they launched with a new system. This was the worst we've ever seen. I mean, it was actually worse than my Ford Touch in its introduction year.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
It was more than 20% problem,
Oh.
which is like one in 5 owners
Oh,
had a
gosh.
problem with that system.
Not only is Infiniti and Touch a pain to use, but it's a pain to own, it sounds
Yeah.
like. But that's not their only problem, right?
No, that's not the only problem. They also have power steering problems.
But they also are having problems with I'm going to get this wrong, the JX, which turned into the QX60, right? That thing's
Yes.
kind of a mess, too.
That's also dropped. That was the JX that was introduced last year, and now they've gone from average to worse.
It's sort of following the path of the Nissan Pathfinder. Nissan came out with a bunch of new products recently. You'd go to the auto shows, and we're going to roll out 300 new products in the next 4 months, and that didn't work out so well for them.
No. I mean, a conservative approach of rolling out products definitely works better for a lot of different automakers. And every time you make everything different and try to make all these changes, we're just seeing stumbles. And especially with an automaker like Nissan, which does not have a very good track record of new introductions.
Because Pathfinder's bad. Altima is
bad.
Ultima is the least reliable
And also,
midsize sedan.
put that in perspective. I mean, there's
Almost every midsize sedan is reliable.
Exactly.
That one's reliable, but the Altima is not. We get a lot of comments on YouTube, why is the Altima bad? That's one reason. The thing's really not reliable.
Yeah, I think they came out with that new transmission that really dragged them down.
The new CVT.
CVT.
Sentra's also pretty
also
bad, too.
But the bright spot is the Nissan Rogue.
Right, so that
That
proves
was
they actually
redesigned.
could introduce a new product and it does okay.
But again, they did not really change the powertrain of the Rogue that much. Now the CVT might have been the new one, but they already had inherited from the
You've worked it
Altima
out. You've
and
worked it out in the Altima.
what the problems were.
Oh.
So they did kind of benefit.
Another Japanese luxury brand that isn't doing so well is Acura. Acura has a reputation of being reliable, but they're not in their first year. MDX, RLX, how'd they do?
Yeah, they are just average. Yeah, you're right. Usually Acura would introduce a model with at least a better than average. But this year it was disappointing. They have the 2 new redesigned models and they are both only average. Again, that infotainment system comes into play.
And there's other issues. I mean, even
Yeah.
going back, I mean, Acura's had issues with transmissions. So, I mean, for someone who, and I know there's many buyers that are I'm looking for a luxury make. I want something that's really going to be reliable.
Sure.
And they're saying, okay, I sort of like the BMWs and Mercedes, but I'm going to go buy an Acura or buy a Lexus. I think really we're getting to the point where that's not really the advice. It's buying a Lexus because there's really a big difference between those two vehicles. at
Right,
this
you
point.
can't just say Japanese as a blanket recommendation.
It's certainly not Infiniti.
Surprisingly, you could say Audi. Audi had a real good year.
Again, this is not just this year. It was last year too. I mean, we said Audi was in the top 5 of any, not automakers, but any brands. So,
And I think Audi's being helped by the fact it's a fairly old lineup. The A4 has been around forever, the Q5 has been around forever, the A6 is like 2 or 3 years old. It's only the new A3, and that was too new to have survey information.
Yeah.
but but again, it's 2 years in a row. It's not just one-time deal. We've seen actually a little bit of a steady increase of Audi's reliability. distancing themselves from Volkswagen.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I mean, even
Yeah.
even if you consider older product and whatnot, I mean, it's almost a Hyundai Kia situation. Sometimes that platform it first goes out in Volkswagen, or first it actually hits Europe, and they actually work out some of the kinks. And when it comes as an Audi for our market, it tends to be pretty good. So.
Right, and they are pretty conservative as well. They only have the turbo powertrains, the supercharged, the V6, and they don't have
Yeah, they only have a
lot,
handful of
yeah.
powertrains.
Right.
They use basically one infotainment system, one or
Correct.
two infotainment
Right.
systems across the board.
Yeah.
So like BMW, they've been able, iDrive's reliable, if I recall
Yes,
correctly.
it is, yeah.
Audi's MMI is reliable. They've been making this stuff forever.
Forever.
Mercedes has not been making some cars forever. And what happened to Mercedes?
Now, Mercedes had the newer entry-level CLA sedan, and that had a lot of problems in its first year.
That's just a car to avoid. It's not a nice car, and it's really
It's a
trouble
very
for it.
obvious sense of cost cutting. It's like, okay, we want to make a Mercedes-Benz that looks like a Mercedes-Benz. The car looks great. But it's like they went through that car and they're like, let's see where we can save money. And oh my God, it shows in how it performs, and now it's showing in how the thing holds up.
A car where they didn't save any money is the S-Class. But I mean, it's a technological tour de force. What do you...
Let's put every option you could possibly think of in this one car, and it's all new, and we'll try out all these new technologies. And yeah, I guess it wasn't a real, you didn't have to guess a whole lot that there's going to be problems with that car.
Finally, to wrap up, it doesn't mean all high-tech cars are unreliable. Let's talk about the Tesla.
Tesla is, last year it was average. This year there were some problems with it. We saw some problems with our car as well, but it maintains an average reliability rating, so we continue to recommend it.
Yeah, our analyst Mel did some clever digging, and he found that Tesla massively changed. They changed a bunch of parts. They redesigned a lot of stuff between 12 and 13 as the years go on, and we saw
Yeah,
that.
we saw, yeah.
The later cars are getting more reliable, because our car is an early 13. Edmund's car was, I believe, a 12 or an early 13 that had major problems, and we're seeing that now, right?
Yes, especially the early introduced 2012, they had a lot more problems.
Including some drive system
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah, that were fixed later on.
So we've seen those issues, and yeah, and to your point, when you go on the interwebs, you see a lot of these, people who are the early adopters, and they're having those things, but it's like there seems to be an uptick in the performance of that, and like I said, there are less reliable cars and there's more reliable cars, but it appears to be maintaining.
It's holding average.
Yeah.
And we have 1,300 Tesla owners.
Yeah,
More than.
More than, that's right. That just blows my mind.
Yep.
We have far more than what we talked about here. So check out Consumer Reports online for far more reliability information. As always, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.